good evening. Thank you all for joining us for this first Visionary Transit Network meeting. I will be turning it over to our project manager, Janice Soriano Ramos, to start us off and talk a little bit about why we're meeting here tonight.
Thanks, Deanna, and thanks everyone for joining us this evening. I am really looking forward to tonight's discussion. It's going to be super interactive, and as folks are trickling in, I just wanted to give everyone a sense of what to expect tonight. So without further ado, next slide, please. So as I mentioned, as people are trickling in, I want to give staff some time to make some brief introductions so that you have a sense of who VTA is in the room speaking with you all. You'll see later into the agenda, we have a opportunity to do breakout groups. And so we have several VTA staff here with us tonight to help facilitate conversations in those breakout rooms. After introductions, we'll do a quick poll to also get to know you and who else is in this virtual room, and also get a sense of how you travel throughout the county today. Next, the meat of the discussion tonight, what the Visionary Network is, why it's important, why it should be important to you. We really want to dive deep into that and also hear share out what we've heard from you so far, since you have been hearing quite a bit from VTA through the Valley Transportation Plan effort, and now tonight with this Visionary Network, we want to do a report out what we heard so far. Lastly, before we break into the small out groups, I'll also get into what kind of feedback is going to be most helpful as we craft this Visionary Network together, and give you some examples or ideas to kind of get the juices flowing as we start sharing ideas today for our future of transit service. So that covers the agenda for tonight. And so I think the next slide, I'll actually pass it off to Deanna to go over some Zoom controls.
Sorry, let me unmute myself. Throughout this evening's meeting, there's going to be an opportunity for everyone to participate in some breakout rooms and also ask some clarifying questions as we go through the meeting. So feel free to use the chat function at the bottom of your screen. You can make sure that your message is set to everyone, and we will answer those questions as we come to them, or at a necessary break time where we can adjust that. If you are using the phone to use audio rather than your computer, you can press *9 to raise or lower your hand, and that way we'll know that you're trying to make a comment. *6 would mute you. And then we're just going to ask people to kind of stay muted to eliminate distractions when you're not speaking.
Great. Thanks, Deanna. So before we get into the poll, before I forget, I did mention we'd have some brief staff introductions. So I'll just call everyone out in order here to briefly introduce themselves, starting with, since Deanna and I already went, we'll start with Menominee.
Hi, I'm Menominee Boyd, or Menominee McCarter, and I am in community outreach on this evening. I am here to help facilitate the meeting and welcome everyone.
Thanks, Menominee. Nikki?
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Nikki. I'm a transportation planner, and I focus on bus stop programs.
Thanks, Nikki. Gretchen?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. My name is Gretchen Biza. I'm the acting community outreach manager at VTA.
Thanks, Gretchen. John?
Hello, everyone. My name is John Sagomini, Senior Transportation Planner, working with Janice on a couple things, but namely our long-range transportation plan, which the input you give today is also beneficial to that effort. So thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, John. And Larissa?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Larissa Sandifer. I'm a transportation planner, and I focus on the long-range planning team.
Great. Thank you. So with that, I believe we can get started with our brief poll questions. Let's take it away, Deanna.
Great. I will launch our poll right now. So we're asking, I think there's 4 questions. 3 of them are basic demographic questions. They help us understand who's in this meeting, whether the people who are attending tonight are representative of the community that we serve. And it's just helpful for us in community outreach to know how we're doing and where we need to kind of reach out more. And then the 4th question is just asking about your primary mode of travel. So are you using a personal vehicle, bus or light rail, ride shares, bicycles, walking? We just want to know as we get into this meeting and talk about the future of our transit network, how people are moving around right now. So this is an optional poll, but your information does help us. So we would appreciate that. I will leave this open for another 30 seconds or so. I'll give you all a chance to answer, and then I'll share the results so we can see who's with us this evening. I'm seeing 80% participation. That sounds good to me. I will go ahead and close the poll and share the results. Okay, so, ideally for us in community outreach, we would see a wide range for all of these categories because it shows that we're talking to everybody. So it's nice to see different age groups represented, different ethnicities and races that's represented, different income levels. And then as we get to your primary mode of transportation, we're seeing 28% in personal vehicles, 44% using bus and light rail. So thank you for using our system. Some rideshare, 20% bicycles, and 1 person's getting around on foot. Love to see it. So thanks for participating in that. And I will toss it back to Jean.
All right, great. So let's really get started. So I see a lot of familiar names and faces, some from yesterday's Ask VTA forum. So thank you for joining yesterday afternoon for that. And I even see some familiar names from our 2023 service plan. So thank you again for your feedback there. Today, we are here to talk about the Visionary Network. And as you may have heard in the past couple of weeks, this is meant to be our aspirational transit service for the entire Santa Clara County. It is a joint, but it's a separate effort from the Valley Transportation Plan that John had mentioned earlier that he's heading up. And I say it's a joint effort because the Visionary Network is what defines the transit vision that the VTP will fold into its process for developing projects. It's a separate effort because it really will cement how transit service should look like over the next 30 years. This is really the first time our agency will be carving out a long-range sort of general transit plan, a transit vision for the county. So we are so excited to see you all here, and we really feel it's important that it ultimately becomes a shared vision with VTA and with you as riders, with you as county residents. But it should also be a shared vision with our cities that reflects what streets should prioritize transit, how often our buses and light rail should arrive, how early and late our service should run in general, and also what bus stops and stations should look like and provide. Next slide, please. So how is this Visionary Network going to be used? It is really timely in this day, and it's really instrumental for 3 very distinct reasons. For one, VTA is ready to establish a blueprint for each of the annual transit service plans that we are looking forward to working with you all much more regularly. This blueprint is going to be one that we gradually build up and follow in the long term with every annual service plan we get adopted. So for those of you who aren't familiar with our recent annual service planning process, we recently did a huge redesign of our transit network back in late 2019, and we had all the intentions of doing an annual transit service plan following from there. Of course, the pandemic had different intentions and interrupted that, but We were fortunate to do this process, kicking it off with the 2023 service plan that we just got adopted last month. And that's great because that plan, that 2023 plan, gets us back to restoring the rest of our transit service that was suspended during the pandemic. And on that quick note, we're really close and we really only have a few weekend hours and early morning, late night hours to bring back. Second, I mentioned earlier the Visionary Network's relationship to the VTP. So since the Visionary Network defines the VTP's vision for transit, it will ultimately also guide which projects get developed through the VTP process. So what that means is any projects that are worked through the VTP process that clearly support the service that we get adopted in this Visionary Network, that is ultimately what will be looked upon more favorably than projects that don't support our Visionary Network. Finally, it's really no secret that our county continues to grow. And in fact, through the VTP process, I'm sure all of you have learned that Santa Clara County specifically could very well outpace our Bay Area county peers. And that really builds a very necessary case for increasing our transit service in the near future. What this Visionary Network will do is it'll set the North Star for how much transit service needs to grow for our county so that we can keep up with our county's growing needs, whether it's to support our growing population, our economic prospects, our development throughout the county. All of that will help our agency make the case for building more transit service and funding more transit service in the next few decades. All right, so next slide, please. So here's a visual of the Visionary Network timeline to give you a sense of how this is going to roll out. Well into the winter, we'll be focused on a lot of visioning meetings and exercises with all sorts of people in the county, everyone from, as I mentioned, VTA transit riders like you, county residents. We're also going to be meeting with other groups like community-based organizations, city staff, and elected officials through their various meetings, just to keep them in the loop on what we've been hearing from everyone so far. And so those will be happening in different spaces for those groups as well, just like we are focusing on residents and riders today. In February, we do need to wrap up our engagement period to reflect what we've heard from you all into what we're calling a Visionary Network deliverable. So what that deliverable will look like, it will set the tone for what sort of transit service characteristics the Visionary Network will implement. So things like what the frequent network should look like, how frequently our service should be running, how early and late into the night our service will be running in general, hours of operation, new routes, new transit corridors that would be prioritizing transit in the future. And other transit service models, maybe like microtransit, maybe there's community shuttles that we could be working on with cities in partnership with them. And of course, we'll also look into how we establish bus stop and station amenity guidelines as well. Then after that, once we have this Visionary Network developed, we bring this to our various VTA committees and get that Visionary Network adopted by our board in the spring. Next slide, please. So we know that as of late, I mentioned you've been hearing from VTA a bunch lately about the various projects and programs that we're working on. And we're really grateful for you lending your time to do so and lending your voice in these previous and very most recent efforts, because it really helps us find common themes across what we've heard. So I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about what we've heard in the various efforts that we've had this past year. You might remember for the 2023 plan, us asking you to identify your top 3 priority improvements for recovering our service. Here's how they ranked. Most frequent, of course, more frequent buses and trains continue to be a priority to you all, though there's, of course, several requests to bump up frequency during certain times of the day, even for our local routes that don't run as frequently as 15 minutes or better. Weekend service and longer hours of operation are also quite the priority as well, especially extending later into the night where many of our riders work late night hours. And in fact, that is something that we do want to honor and want to help reflect in this visionary network with you all, because we are seeing in more recent times our weekend ridership recovering at sometimes a faster pace than our weekday ridership. We also tend to hear a lot of feedback on routes in our frequent network, those that run every 15 minutes or better. And we know that we are very much still hurting and running our service as frequently as we promised, with all the missed trips that have been reported because of our shortage of operators. We are thrilled to note that we are back at 15-minute service on weekdays for our light rail. I know that's something you all missed. I certainly missed it. But we also continue to hear that the rider experience is something of a concern, related to safety, security, and cleanliness. And that really can make or break a rider's decision to come back to our services. And lastly, we know that there's lots of interest in hearing a lot more about our bus stop amenities plans through what we call our Better Bus Stops program. And that's a program that Nikki mentioned earlier, she heads up. Next slide, please. So for those of you who tuned in with John and his team a couple of weeks ago at the VTP meeting, we also noted many overlapping things related to your vision for transit. And these are just a few that I've noted here in summary. More transfer points with key local destinations, better coordinated schedule connections with regional services, more transportation options for seniors and those with disabilities, shorter headways, especially at night. So you want to see service come way more frequently than just once every hour. So these are just a few of the themes, but together with this feedback with the 2023 plan, we acknowledge that these are themes that will continue to resonate with you all as we talk tonight about the future of transit service. So I just wanted to highlight all of that for you all as well. All right, next slide. So let's get into it. What kind of feedback is needed for the visionary network? I have a few slides here to just give you some examples of what we're looking for. But the central question that we really want to get at tonight is, over the next 30 years, in what ways can VTA's transit network better serve you? And to just get some juices flowing, we've got 6 categories here to ponder, and I'll go over those a little bit more in detail in the next few slides. So next slide, please, Deanna. So first, what are your ideas for more frequent buses and trains? Frequency on our service, as you know, is key to ensuring reliable service too. So more frequent buses and trains means hardly ever needing to look at a schedule or consult one, or being worried about missing that connection because you know the next one is coming soon. This visual here gives you an idea of what our frequent network will look like next year in 2023, just to give you a sense of what streets and corridors are served by frequent routes today, or in the near future, but also today. So we want to hear things like, should we actually run our frequent bus network every 10 minutes or wink every 5, what sort of, which streets should run frequent buses? Are there any streets that should have a frequent route that aren't running that today? Do we need more frequent light rail trains? Do we want our service to run more frequently at night? So those are just some examples for you to ponder. In the next slide, the next question is, what are your ideas for hours of operation? So are there areas where we could run our service earlier into the morning, later into the night? Are there some routes that you feel would really benefit as a 24-hour route or an hour route service? This visual is just to give you a sense of how frequently our routes run weekday, Saturday, and Sunday. So you'll see that our most frequent routes tend to run on the weekdays. Those are the ones that are highlighted in red there. We offer less frequency, of course, on the weekend. So we really want to hear your thoughts on how we can improve hours of operation and frequency. So speaking of frequency and the weekend service, what are your ideas for weekend service? This is a visual that shows what the weekend service frequencies will look like across the map for next year. So of course, again, showing the routes that run 15 minutes or better in red. For weekend service, is there certain routes that actually need weekend service? We don't run all of our routes on the weekends currently. Do we need weekend service to new areas that we don't serve today? Should there be later night service specifically for any weekend destinations that you have in mind that we don't cover today? Another idea that I've also heard is weekend service on every single one of our rapid routes, since we don't offer that today. All right, next slide, please. So what are your ideas for bus stop and stations? Oftentimes we think about service, but what's really important is to focus on your first step in interacting with transit. What is your rider experience like when you're waiting at a bus stop or station? Are we missing amenities? Are there some areas where shelters can be placed? Is there a stop you have in mind that needs many seating options? Are there areas at night that you feel deserve more lighting, just to assure you that you do feel safe at night and you can see everything in your surroundings? So we really encourage you to think about what sort of requests you may have for bus stops and station amenities as well in this discussion. Right, last few slides here, your ideas for service to new areas. This is, of course, a very popular one and one that I expect to have all sorts of ideas tonight. So please be bold and please ask for them. So new routes, new bus connections to light rail, route extensions. Are there some routes that you envision could benefit from serving other areas that they don't today? Other transit service models, other than fixed route transit service. We know that fixed route transit service doesn't work for every geographic location. So speaking of which, in the next slide, what are your ideas for other transit services? Fixed route transit, bus and light rail service isn't necessarily the one-all fix-all solution for everyone's needs. So what's being entertained a lot these days is some of you may have heard about this, on-demand transit service areas. So I bring this up because our Measure B 2016 program has an innovative transit solutions program that awards cities who are interested in piloting what we're calling on-demand transit services. And so instead of operating your typical 40-foot buses on fixed route transit, they contract out these minivans, so to speak, and it's essentially like hailing a ride within a given service area. So an example is one that's operating today. We have the Milpitas Smart Transit on-demand transit service. That's a citywide program. Similarly, we've got Morgan Hill doing the same thing, and Palo Alto is embarking on their pilot program, hopefully next year. So those three that you see in blue are funded by VTA's Measure B program today. So are there potential opportunities there to work with cities to work on-demand, not just to serve these cities, but to supplement our fixed route transit service today? And so that's why you see these areas kind of overlaid with our fixed route transit bus and light rail network. There's opportunities there to make those connections. So would love to hear your thoughts on exploring on-demand services with our cities. And then final slide so that I can stop talking and let you all do the talking. There's other transit service models to explore as well. Are there opportunities to look more closely at first and last mile shuttles, school service, our existing express bus partnership program and commuter buses? So, those are just some ideas that fall into that more general category. Okay, so now to hear from you all. I think we're ready to get started with the breakout groups. We have a healthy amount of participants here, and we will be breaking out into 4 distinct breakout groups to dive deeper into what your ideas are for enhancing our service. So in the next slide, I've put together some guidelines on how we could engage in our breakout rooms most effectively. So for the next 30 minutes, we are going to be using a platform called Mural, and Deanna will get more into details on how to use that in a bit. And once we get into these breakout groups, we want to give you all some time, 5, maybe 10 minutes or so, to post any and all ideas you have on this vision board. And so what you see on the right is what you'll see in our Mural portal. After that, you'll collectively talk about these 3 prompts. So quick round of introductions. What motivates you to ride transit? Nice little icebreaker to get to know who's in your group and really what motivates you to be here today as well. We'd love for you to also summarize and discuss your group's top inputs of interest. So if you see common themes or a lot of upvotes on certain ideas that have been shared in your group, we'd love to hear those highlights. And then lastly, a 30-year planning horizon is huge, right? It's so challenging to talk about sometimes. But because we have this annual service planning process as an opportunity to build towards these 30 years, we want to know what your top priorities are within maybe those first early 10 years. What service enhancements do you think VTA should focus on during those early years of this planning horizon? And then once we wrap up here after those 30 minutes, we'll report back to this larger group and we'll talk about next steps. So Deanna, would you like to introduce Mural?
Yes, thanks, Janice. I'm just here to give you some logistics, and then we will turn it loose to you because it is your time to participate. So as you entered the meeting today, you were kind of randomly assigned to 4 breakout groups. So Janice will be leading group number 1. John, you'll have group number 2. Larissa, you'll have group number 3. And Nikki is going to have group number 4. So in a minute, one of my colleagues is going to throw a link to Mural in the chat. Actually, let's have Menominee do that now. Can you throw that in there? So when you open up the link to Mural, you'll see the screen like the image here. You'll be assigned a random animal avatar. This one is a visiting rabbit. So you can choose to enter your name, or you can stay an animal. It's up to you. And then you can enter as a visitor. I'm actually going to switch my screen really quickly so that I can continue to guide you through this. One moment. Okay, so as you enter Mural, we have 4 different versions of that vision board set up for you. So once you are in your breakout group, which I will open up in just a moment, you'll be assigned a corner of that segment. So if you're in Nikki's group, you're going to go down to this lower right-hand corner and click on the right-hand corner, and that will take you to your section number 4. If you are with Janice in room 1, you're going to click up here. You'll be taken to the upper left corner, and then you can start participating here. To add a comment, you're just going to click on any Post-it note you want, and you can start typing. Go. And if you have a very chatty group, have a lot of ideas, that's wonderful. You can add more sticky notes. 15 isn't enough, just double click, and you can add additional comments. So with that, I will turn you all loose, open up your breakout rooms. And as Janice said, you'll have 10 minutes to add your ideas to all of these thoughts, and your facilitator will kind of guide you back to your room when it's time to do that. So let me open up the breakout rooms now, and we're ready for your opinions. Starting to see everybody trickle back from their breakout rooms. So welcome back. Thank you. Before we start the report out, you can talk about what you talked about. I just wanted to apologize because I see that some people had some issues with Mural. And it's a relatively new tool for us, and we hadn't run into that problem before. So I just wanted to apologize for that inconvenience. We'll work on that for future meetings, and I hope that you were able to talk about your thoughts and ideas in your discussion. So with that, I will turn it back over to Janice, and you can start the report out.
Okay, great. Well, I feel like I've been talking a lot, so I'll let the other breakout groups go first, and I'm happy to report out last. So why don't we start? I'm going to go randomly. Let's just start with breakout group 3.
Let me unmute. Okay, that was me. I had my camera off reviewing my notes, but so yeah, so the main theme, so we did spend a lot of time on the mural exercise, and there's a lot of sticky notes on there. A main theme was just talking about more frequent bus and trains, and I do have some specific routes, including the Danza 2023 and 523. They also talked about some difficulties with having more frequent transit, and then having it stop at every stoplight and go through congestion makes it difficult to choose to use a bus. And then what should the service enhancements be for the next 10 years? They talked about having more frequency on the weekend service because they see more use in weekend service. And then just basic a lot more frequency. So that was the main takeaway from my group.
Great. Thanks, Larissa. All right, group 4.
Great, thanks, Janice. For group 4, we focused a lot on serving new areas, which was great. We have some areas where there was service previously, and there's interest in bringing service back to those areas. And there's also suggestions on where to extend routes. For example, extending Route 37 to Monterey Center, Eastridge, extending 523 to Alum Rock, service back on San Fernando, and updates to projects where transit was considered, like Highway 85. We also had a good amount of feedback in better bus stops and stations, including more bus stops on certain routes, some suggestions for new stops at specific intersections. We also included frequency, and in the anything else category, signal priority, hybrid buses, bus lanes, and bus rapid transit.
That's great. Thanks, Nikki. All right, group 2, John.
Okay, so actually the mural was a challenge for us. So we kind of just went straight to the questions. So a lot of folks in the breakout room that I had, a lot of them do ride transit. Some people mentioned that they don't like to drive because of all the stress with traffic and bad drivers and other things like that. So one of the things that we also heard, though, is that there is a difficulty using transit. A lot of it has to do with the frequency of the system. So you're kind of left to drive, and kind of the lack of the connectivity between the other systems. Also noting, while, in some cases, this is, transit does work for them. It is a challenge to get out of the county. The way, doing the transfers from one, service to the next, whether it be within our own system or other systems, is really hard, and it's hard to get schedules about that. And some of the themes that we heard, finding hubs for transit, looking at areas in the valley that are not served well. There are a lot of shopping centers and other types of locations in the county that could benefit from frequent service, because people would likely use that service to get to those locations. The apps that are there for transit right now are still kind of hard to use, and maybe a better way to use those apps or another app that just makes it easier to find schedules from other services as well would be good. We did also hear not only that frequency is really important, having better bus stops and time transfers where possible. We also had a discussion about having really good wayfinding signs for VTA. I think a challenge a lot of people have is either the signs are there but have been damaged, you can't really figure it out, or if you're at a VTA stop and you need to catch another service like AT's Transit or something else, there's a challenge to that because it's not clearly marked where to go and how to find it. And then another thing we also heard was good working relationships with the cities, to partner with them and partner with other businesses and other companies to find better solutions for transit. We got a plug for bus signal priority. If buses had priority on some of the routes, it'd be a lot easier to do the move with frequency. And then kind of our planning. Actually, one other thing that I forgot to mention, that looking at the last mile connection, there are needs other than walking that could happen at certain endpoints of VTA transit that people could use to get to their kind of last destination, like bike share, another scooter share, and things like that. And then for the 30-year planning horizon, we actually didn't have a lot of time to get to this, but one thing we did hear was, the transit travel time in Santa Clara Valley is not optimal, but frequency could help reduce some of that option. And then we did get one comment about how can we get high-speed rail on track.
Great, thanks, John. So for my group number one, I'm hearing very similar themes. We sure do not like driving in our cars, and what really motivates us to ride transit is avoiding the stress of finding parking, and really from an environmental perspective, making up for the lost time that we once used to have to commute for long hours by feeling better about yourself and taking transit in place of that. So I heard a lot of those motivations, and then sprinkled in, I also heard a lot about frequency is certainly important, and it's understood that particularly the frequent network, the reason why it exists and why it runs as frequently where it does, but that shouldn't be the end all be all focus of what our future of transit should be. So one comment that really resonated with the group is that improving service, frequent service from every 15 minutes to every 10 minutes is nice, but it may not be as useful as, say, having our buses and trains run every 30 minutes instead of 60 minutes. That really does get into more priority on more of our coverage routes that don't operate as frequently. And so that would really make or break people's experiences with transit as well. We also geographically, we got really specific geographically as well, talking about some areas where our group would like to see more transit, particularly in Los Gatos and the West Valley area. That there is, in our group's words, West Valley is pretty much a void when it comes to transit. There's a huge gap that really needs to be filled there to encourage people to get out of their cars and make that commute through transit, or really through other sustainable modes. And we even talked a little bit about how folks make the decision between driving, taking transit, and even taking their bike. So, our group also shared that in most instances, they prefer to ride their bike because they found that it'll take them less time than it will to hop onto 2 or 3 routes to get them from point A to point B. So biking can oftentimes be faster than taking transit in the 7 to 10 miles that person has to commute. So that's also a theme that I've heard. Other ones, I'm going to skim through real quickly on our mural for some plus ones. Free VTA passes to employees is something that they would like to see encouraged more often throughout our county. The Smart Pass program is something that certainly helps employers encourage their employees to ride. So that's something that they'd like to see encouraged more often. There's also put Caltrain and BART lines and stations on the map. Some folks don't realize there's faster ways to get across the county. Weekend service, every local route should run 7 days a week, even if it's less frequent on weekends. That's a good one. Neighborhood/lower ridership routes should have the last bus at least after 9 p.m., preferably 10 p.m. So yeah, those are some of the themes that I've heard from my group. Really great feedback from them. Really great feedback from everyone. I'm really impressed. I'm zooming out here at this mural and I'm overwhelmed by all the Post-its. So thank you so much, everyone. All right, so Deanna, I think there were some questions that may have been raised during the chat, during the presentation, and perhaps some that are worth talking with the group about.
Yeah, so while you were all busy in your discussion groups, I was going back through the chat and noting things down that I wanted to ask, or noting things that we wanted to save and bring back to our group. So there was a lot of conversation about bus stop amenities, what people prefer in a shelter, whether it's the clear one, whether it protects more from rain, lighting, all of that. So we're saving all those comments because that was one of the things we were considering. And there's also some questions I wanted to throw out to Janice. So one of the questions was, is there going to be any public involvement after this developmental phase for the visionary network? So before the board adopts it, is the public going to be involved in any future steps?
You know, that's a really good question. So I know a big component of the outreach here is visioning, and the interesting but really exciting part about visioning exercises is how iterative I think it could be. And so I think I think it's open-ended. I think there can be several opportunities still for the community to weigh in well before we get this adopted by the board. We have so many transit pop-up events coming up to make sure that we're reaching everyone who rides, but we also want to reach out to those who may not be riding and want to hear input from there. And I do want to say this isn't the last community meeting that we are hosting. We do plan on hosting another virtual community meeting on December 12th that I initially had envisioned taking on a similar format. But I think what I'm hearing is it may be more useful to, because of the iterative nature of these visioning exercises, it may be more helpful to repeat back what we've heard over time and make sure that we've got it right before we cement whatever it is we deliver to the board. So I think there could be more opportunities to close the loop with the community, and we really we're welcome to any and all feedback to how we could circle back and give you updates along the way.
Great, thank you. A second question is the visionary network being designed to fit with the regional connected network plan that is being done by MTC and other agencies?
So I think I could start that question, and not to put John on the spot, but maybe he could fill in any gaps that I can't cover with that. But just to keep everyone in the loop with that, we have learned from MTC that they have grander visions for also doing something similar, where they look at what a better regional connected network could look like. And that would emphasize more connections among regional hubs, and maybe that's an opportunity for local agencies to identify priorities at more of our regional hubs, say like, Santa Clara Transit Center or Diridon, Palo Alto, just naming a few off the top of my head, right? But I think with VTA getting ahead of the game with that and having our own local visionary network, that really will set the stage, and that will really help feed to MTC what our county, like what our riders and what our community members really feel is a priority for regional connection. So I think it's great that we're ahead of the game on this one. And I think, you know, we know our community. We know that a lot of the priority is in local travel, but there still are regional connections that need to be had. So I think it's great that we're starting at the local level first. John, I don't know if there's any other discussions you've had with MTC that you wanted to shed light on with that process.
No, I actually had mentioned that we were doing our missionary network for transit with them kind of ahead of time before I heard about the connected network plan. But I think they have some interest in what we're doing. And I think it's going to be up to us to talk to MTC about our process, because there may be things that our process will do for their effort and vice versa. So I think really the next step, and obviously their effort is just starting. So we'll be in touch with MTC to kind of figure out their parameters and what they've been looking at.
Thank you. There were some comments about, obviously a lot of comments about bus frequency, but also the speed of buses as they sit in traffic with the rest of the Bay Area. So there was a question about, do we have any current info on where routes might benefit from transit priority?
Where routes might benefit from transit priority, like specific corridors or current efforts that we have with cities?
I think that was Dina's question. Do you want to clarify? Corridors and slow spots, she says.
Got it. So, you know, I think to maybe scratch the surface of that question a little bit, I think there have been several efforts that have helped us identify what those corridors are. We have one effort that's called the High Capacity Transit Corridor Study that has really worked with cities to identify which transit corridors are most primed for infrastructure improvements. And so I think that certainly, you know, I don't want to speak incorrectly on it, but I know that was a deep dive study on which of the corridors are best suited or most primed to suggest for more transit infrastructure, such as, you know, transit signal priority or bus only lanes. There's also efforts like, for example, that the city of San Jose headed up with their transit first policy. So that's really going to pave the way for, you know, for not just for them, but maybe for other cities who may be considering transit first policies and identifying which transit corridors are most important in our respective cities. Because one thing I will note, in this process, we do want to have close ties with our cities. We want to ensure that whatever visionary network recommendations come out of this are also in alignment with any general plans they have, any specific plans they have where they're identifying high development in their respective cities. So I think that really is another way to make sure that we're aligned on which of our streets are should be transit corridors. I think there have been strides, for example, with San Jose and identifying Santa Clara Street, for example, as a transit priority corridor and priming that for transit. But yeah, I'm open if anyone else in the group wants to share or add to that the response to that question.
And I do have one last question, and this might be one that John wants to pop in on with his VTP work as well. But one of the questions was, is micro mobility, bikes and scooters, are those being considered part of the public transportation system?
You want to take that, John?
Yeah, I think definitely, because I think we're hearing from a lot of our member agencies and the public about these other options for moving around Santa Clara County. All goes into the mobility theme for, you know, our planning for the future, right? It's not just transit, it's other opportunities that are not transit in some cases. So yeah, our effort will actually look at some of that. And it would also be like kind of a way to interact with our member agencies and to see what works for them and what's worked in the past for them. because there is some challenges to do this based on the land uses that are that it's on, or who owns that land. Yeah, so there's a lot of questions related to that. So yeah, one area that we can look at since we are visioning out 30 years into the future. And the part of the kind of the framework for all of this is that there's things that are happening now in the world, right? We can't build our way out of it. So there has to be other solutions that we can take a look at that may help.
Great. I think that was all I had from the chat. And I'm sure you've got oh, well, here's a question. Does the county control any of the arterial roads or just the cities?
Okay, so the county actually, they expressways, and they own kind of some of the rural roads outside of city limits, but everything else is a property of the city or Caltrans in some cases, if it's the freeways.
I have a question. Does the Caltrans has any plan for high-speed rail? Do you guys have a schedule when that might come on board? A plan for it?
Do we have a schedule for when high-speed rail might come on board?
Yeah, or a plan for it.
Do any of you have an answer for that one?
No.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't.
So you were saying that high speed, I mean, Caltrans is not even thinking about that yet. Or are they working on it?
I don't have the answer to that question. Oh, go ahead, John.
No, I was just going to add, it's a combination of things. I think the state is handling the high-speed rail authority, or they've created an organization, an entity to handle high-speed rail. But now then, in order for high-speed rail to come up here, they'll have to use UPR lines / Caltrain lines. So, and I know cities in South County at least have talked about station planning for, future high-speed rail and how that looks like. But I don't have a schedule for when, it's going to come on board.
If I can just add, sorry, that there has been a lot of work around the Diridon Station area between high-speed rail and VTA's light rail team, the BART team, Caltrain, and I don't have the details of that right now, but I do know that there is a website that has a little bit more information about where all of those plans stand, and I believe it is at diridonsj.org, and I'm going to try to type this in to see if my memory serves. Sorry, of course, yes. So if you go to diridonsj.org, that talks about community engagement around the entirety of the Diridon station area. So that includes high-speed rail, Caltrain, as well as the Downtown West development.
Can you type that onto the chat?
Of course, absolutely.
That would be great.
Sure.
Thanks for looking into that, Gretchen. Okay. So I can go ahead and share my screen again at this point, and we can, let's see where we are, get to the wrap up.
Okay, great. So I'm just popping this timeline up again to remind everyone of what else is to follow. We are definitely just in the early stages of the visioning process for the Visionary Network and even with the VTP. And so these two timelines are very much aligned with each other. We'll continue to engage with you all and with all of these different groups in various ways throughout the winter. In February, we are going to get cranking on what these transit service characteristics will look like in the Visionary Network. And we had talked about ways where the community can weigh in one more time as we do that. So Again, I'd love to hear feedback on from you all on what would be most effective to continue giving updates to you all, but I have some suggestions to do so on the next slide as well. Then once we've got that plan together, that'll be wrapped up for VTA committees and to the board for consideration of their adoption in April. And you know, I do want to reiterate one more time that with this visioning process, how important it is that we continue to engage with different groups and make sure that we're all in alignment with the cities, with riders, with county residents alike, so that we can really make sure that it's going to be a service that that serves every group, especially through CBOs, especially serving equity focused groups in our county. And then, so that brings me to my final slide here to be more specific about more ways to engage as a rider and as a county resident. So I mentioned earlier, we have our second virtual community meeting specifically on the Visionary Network, scheduled for Monday, the 12th, December 12th, same time as today. Feel free to go on our website and register again. If you'd like to attend again, I think based on what I'm hearing today, I think there's a lot of feedback that can be shared and carried forward to this next one. And I really hope that we can dive deeper on specifics as we digest all the information that we heard today. But for those who couldn't make it tonight, please feel free to share widely with others to participate. This is really the space for the community to weigh in on the Visionary Network, and you know, cities and community-based organizations, you know, they've got their own avenues to share their feedback with us. So we really want to cultivate this space for riders and for our county residents. And then speaking of riders, if you happen to be at any one of our transit centers, we are scheduling them as we go, very pop-up style. For example, a couple weeks ago, we were at the Berryessa Transit Center just chatting with passersby about the Visionary Network and the VTP. And that board will look very familiar to you all because we have a physical version of that vision board. And we want to continue doing this through the end of January. So just continue to check back with us on our website. We also have a subscribe option on our website. So we'll be able to push further updates through you via email if you want to keep tabs on us and this effort. So I think, yeah, that's all I have for tonight. That concludes tonight's first ever Visionary Network community meeting. And I am so grateful for you all for taking the time tonight to get brainstorming with us. That mural board is so full and I can't wait to digest and read all of it. So thank you again. We'll hear again from you soon.